Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. My name is Laura Harrison, and I'm the Oral History Officer for the Jewish History Association of South Wales. This is the first of our July talks, and it's titled The Life and Times of an Eccentric Welsh Jewish Atheist. Through these talks, we hope to give a bit of insight into the work we do as an organisation gathering oral histories. I'm not going to talk for very long, as Lionel is far more interesting than me, but Lionel was interviewed by the Jewish History Association of South Wales back in 2018. He was born in Grangetown, Cardiff in 1933. His paternal grandparents were Polish migrants who had come to Britain in the late 19th century looking for work. His mother's family had fled Odessa at the turn of the 20th century due to witnessing terrible acts of brutality and violence. Lionel was bar mitzvahed at the Orthodox synagogue on Cathedral Road, and throughout his teens and early 20s was an active member of the Zionist youth club Habanim. At 18, he was the principal clarinetist with the National Youth Orchestra of Wales. After raising a family with his wife Miriam and establishing a successful business, he continues in his retirement to not only compose and perform original pieces, but also teaches clarinet, saxophone, recorder, keyboard, and musical theory. Today, Lionel will be sharing his life story, and we're also very privileged that he'll be entertaining us with a clarinet solo during his talk. If you have any questions for Lionel, please write them in the chat, and I will monitor them for our Q&A at the end. So thank you all for joining us, and take it away, Lionel.
Thank you, Laura. I hope that the multitude listening can all hear me. Can you? I hope so anyway. And it's a great pleasure to be with you today, even though it's on Zoom. Zoom is better than nothing, but believe me, to be with you in reality is what life is about. But as Laura has said, I am Welsh first, Jewish second, and a sort of gentle pessimist third. The beauty of being a pessimist is when things go right, you're so happy, whereas optimists sometimes miss out. As Laura said, I was born on the 3rd of the 3rd, 33. And my father assured me that when I asked him many, many years later, what time of day, he said immediately, without question, at 3 o'clock in the morning. Now it was quite something for me, because everything in my whole life has been in threes. I mean, for example, I'm the third child. My parents, sadly, had 3 daughters before their 3 sons, who all died. And the eldest sister I would have had died in 1919 of what was called then Spanish flu. So there's an interesting sort of situation. And I sometimes wonder why on earth my mother was able to survive this, and my father, because at the time, you know, to lose a child who was 4, she was born in 1915, to have a daughter die at the age of 4.5, and then followed by another one at 2.5, and then followed by another one just about 1 year of age, was unbelievable. So I didn't realize I had sisters until I was at my grandmother's, that's my mother's funeral, just after the end of the war, when Solly, my father, and I'll show you a picture of my father, I don't know whether you can see that, all of you clearly, is a dead ringer for Captain Mannering of Dad's Army. I don't know whether any of you ever watched Dad's Army, but it's my favorite. When I'm feeling down, I always enjoy every episode because I've got the box set. Okay, so in fact, after this, there were 2 sons born in quick succession, followed, would you believe it, 7 and a bit years later by yours truly, me. Cardiff in those days, I mean, I remember so distinctly. You see, I lived in Cardiff until I went in to do my national service in 1954, having graduated in economics, which was, as far as I was concerned, a complete waste of time. To be honest with you, there were 5 years of my life which were pretty horrendous. And in fact, when I think back, the 3 years doing economics at Cardiff University College, as it was in those days, was a waste of space. Subsequently, I went into the army and joined the military intelligence, which in peacetime was a waste of space. During the war, it did a very, very fine job. But when I went in 54, it was really no longer necessary as it was at that time. Later, it was reorganized. I left Cardiff then in 54, having spent 21 years there. And in 56, I got married to a most wonderful woman who is on the wall behind me. I don't know whether you can see that picture. I'll move the thing so you can see it better. No, you probably can't see it. Not to the end of the world. I will show you a picture of her, because this is a picture of her dancing in 1951. And this was the Festival of Britain. And she was dancing with a chap named Tony Travis, who died very recently. And it really, that's when I fell in love. She was, let me see, 51. She was born in 36. She was 17. I was totally, absolutely in love. But it was 5 years before we could get married. And we used to joke that we were the last virgins in the world to get married. You know, life was different in those days. So that was interesting. Now, let me tell you a bit about my grandparents. You see, my name is Lionel Elton, but my father was Solomon Ehrenberg, E-R-E-N-B-E-R-G. Ehrenberg is not a Jewish name, it's a German name. The word Ehren, honorable in German, and Berg, mountain or hilltop, fine for Germans, but not for a little boy in Ninian Park School who was never a victim of anti-Semitism, but was in fact considered to be a kraut. And my nickname at that time was Fritz, which did not please me. I didn't like it. I kept on telling them I was Welsh, born in Cardiff in Grangetown, near Ninian Park, although in fact, by the time I was 7, they moved to Leckwith Road. I don't know if any of you know Cardiff. It was very close to what was Ninian Park Football Club, football ground, okay? So my grandparents came on my father's side from Warsaw. And he and his new wife, he was then age 17, she was 16. His name was Herschel Ehrenberg. And they came over to London initially in 1886. The reason was that he couldn't get work and he was frightened that he would be drafted into the Polish army, which was almost like an instant death. So he came with his new wife, Fanny, who lived to be about 90 something, and in Plantagenet. They moved originally to London, the two of them. I often wonder what happened to their family, their extended family, because obviously they may well have all perished in the Holocaust, because, you know, Warsaw was overrun by the Germans, and the Nazi party, which was a monstrous concept, annihilated so many Polish Jewish people. They moved to Manchester after London, and then after a dreadful fire, similar to the one that killed so many people in London in that dreadful blaze. There was a fire in a similar tenement in Manchester, and they moved to Bridgend. The two of them moved to Bridgend with a considerable family. There were 5 daughters and 4 sons, and they lived in South Wales, and they were very, very happy there. And then eventually they moved to the metropolis Cardiff, of course, where at that time there was a very large Jewish community, about 5,000–6,000. Today, I believe it's a few hundred, I'm not sure. Now, the other side of the family, my mother's side, as a much more interesting one, because nobody knows how the hell they got to Cardiff or why they got to Cardiff. In fact, the family, as far as I can trace, were from Romania. They lived in Bucharest, and they were frightened because there was a dreadful pogrom, and a number of their family friends were murdered, because it was almost a sort of fun thing. I've always considered, in a way, that anti-Semitism is a bit like, in this country, fox hunting. It's a fun thing, pursued by many without any care. Anyway, they moved in 1904 to Odessa on the Black Sea, which wasn't that far from Bucharest, and in fact seemed a clever thing to do, because in the case of trouble, they could get on a boat and get the hell out quick, which in fact they had to do. Because in 1905, there was a massive pogrom, which was only superseded by Hitler's antics in the last Second World War. They then got on a boat. I don't know where they intended to go, but they ended up in Cardiff, which I'm pleased about, because that's where I was born. Interestingly, so the two families, the Ehrenbergs, oh, by the way, my mother's lot were called Kirchner. Kirchner was changed to Kitchener. And my mother, who had a good sense of humor in a weird sort of way, used to tell people that she was the illegitimate daughter of Lord Kitchener, which was quite funny when I think about it these days. Although Lord Kitchener, of course, was later not exactly the great man that they all thought at the beginning of World War I. So that was the origin. And just for the record, I've discovered that there were other elements of the Kirchner family who moved to Berlin and to Paris. The Berlin lot, of course, luckily for Max, the eldest uncle of mine, who died before Hitler's dreadful regime, he had 3 children who were rescued by my father Sol. This picture, where is it? The one I showed you earlier. Oh no, sorry, that's not Sol. Where's he gone? There he is. Beg your pardon. He was a man who made things happen. And he went to Germany in 1938 to get out the Kinder, the children. Actually, they weren't children. They were sort of in their very, very late teens, early 20s. And he got them in by bribing, and it was quite something. So this is the origin of how they came here. And one of the interesting things I've discovered about the Welsh and the Jewish sort of fraternity is there's a great deal they have in common. The Welsh were messed about and given a bloody hard time by the English over a long period of time. And the Jews, I mean, about 400 or 500 years. But the Jews were sort of messed about by everybody for about 3,000 years. And the two came together, because I think that the Welsh people felt about the Jewish immigrants a sort of weird pride, because the Welsh have often considered themselves the 13th tribe of Israel, which is rather unusual. So there we are. That's the origins of my sort of family. My father had a slight Manchester accent. He always supported Man City. And my mother had very definitely a sort of Welshish accent. And that's the beginnings. I myself quite enjoyed Cardiff. I was a keen soccer player. I had a trial for Cardiff City, which I didn't get in. My two friends did, to my fury, but they were damn sight better footballers than me. Rugby I didn't play because my two elder brothers did, and I was determined not to. Anyway, it was too dangerous and I'm a coward. And secondly, I couldn't understand the rules of the game. Beyond me, totally. Right, let's go on to other parts of my life. I think that I'm the last man standing, as it were. And that's the trouble being the youngest. Often the others die before you. And at this moment, I'm 88 and a quarter. And you know, all about me, people are not well, they're suffering. And I find that these days, their suffering impinges upon me. I mean, I've been living in relative luxury and comfort because I had an interesting career. Let me tell you a bit about that. I was hoping to become a clarinetist, a professional. And I'm going to just play you something now. Would you like to hear some music?
Yes, please, definitely.
This is a clarinet, yes, and it's a very fine one. So I'm going to play you a nice little tune. So let me just, I'm going to turn to, I hope you can hear this all right. Laura, can you hear me all right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Give me a shout when I'll start playing. Good. Can you all hear right? That's a very, very well known. I hope you enjoyed that. If you could hear it, that's a well known wedding tune, and I remember it from my own wedding. And I see a couple of hands going up, and that's rather nice to know. You see, clarinet was something which came into my life when I was, let me think, just about 15. My elder brother, I had two brothers, Eric and Harold. Eric went off to live in Israel on a kibbutz. The year after the state of Israel was declared in 1948, Eric went to Kfar Hanassi in 1949, and he lived on the kibbutz all his life. He was a teacher, and I didn't see much of him. Mim and I have actually went to Israel on a couple of occasions and went round the country, but you know, I was Zionistic, but no, it wasn't for me. And in fact, the middle son, Harold, who was a linguist, and in fact, at the end of the war, his German speaking was outstanding. I mean, he spoke German better than most Germans, and it was sort of the equivalent of BBC English. And he translated from English to German, German to English. and his speech was outstanding. So he was at the Nuremberg war trials as an interpreter. And one day he came back with a load of stuff which was stolen, including a clarinet. And he said, "There you are, kid, there's a present for you." I picked it up and it was like a duck taking to water. I loved it. And it was the beginning of the Renaissance for me, because my childhood was not a happy one. I won't dwell upon it because I tried to do what Lizzie Bennet, do you know Lizzie Bennet? She was the heroine in Pride and Prejudice. One of my favorite, I've got a hand going up. I love that woman. And of course, when eventually she was full of prejudice, as you know, and of course, when she eventually captured the love and affection and realized what was going on of Fitzwilliam Darcy, who was full of pride, you see, she said to him at one point, because he was doing a usual male trick of grizzling and groaning and moaning and powling and, you know, or playing the ain't it awful game. And she said to him, "Think only of your past, as its remembrance gives you pleasure." And I think that's such a wonderful idea. Not easy to do because the awful memories do come back and try to haunt you. But I do try to do that. Anyway, I didn't have a good first 15 years for various reasons I won't go into. But the clarinet came into my life and very immediately I became really very good. I'm not one of these that hides my light under a bush. I know what I'm good at. I'm not a bad storyteller. I'm a good entertainer. I try to be kind to people. I should explain to you, I'm a Friday child. And you know, the Thursday child's full of woe, Friday's child is loving and giving. Well, I was rather pleased when I not that long ago discovered that the 3rd of March 1933 was a Friday. And so I do try to be what is called in Yiddish a mensch. A mensch is something rather special. And on this point, I'm going to do a little plug. There's one of the books which I want you all to buy. And if you do, and if you don't like it, I will buy the book from each of you at the price you paid. Now, the book is this. The Joys of Yiddish. I see that Rebecca's put her hand up. That's good. It's a marvelous book, and it's full of wisdom and wit and love and affection. And Leo Roston, the author, is absolutely marvelous. I don't know what that digression was, but I think it's time for a bit of more music. Would you like some more music? Show me. Yes or no? Yes?
Yes, please, definitely.
All right. I'll play a Welsh tune. That's Cumronda, and it's a nice tune, isn't it? It really is lovely. And you see, this is another interesting thing which relates to the Welsh-Jewish connection. And that's this, that take the anthems, the national anthems of Wales and Israel and the Jewish national anthem. They're very, very interesting. They're fascinating tunes. Unlike the English national anthem, which has got to be the most boring of all time. And I speak as a musician. Mind you, I must tell you, I did support them when they were playing their football game the other night. And I was very grieved when Wales got smashed by Denmark. But there you go, you can't win them all, can you? So the Welsh national anthem is essentially a sad tune, even though it's in the major key. There's a sort of yearning, isn't there? Da dee da da. It really, and of course the Jewish national anthem. See, there's something similar, so different from this one. For example, I won't tell you the nationality, you must guess. Etc., etc. And of course, you've got, it's very interesting. And then, of course, you've got this one, which I always feel is quite boring. Etc. I won't go on. All right. Right. Let's move on. I went to Canton High School before I went up to college, which is now called Chapter. Has anyone known Chapter at all in Cardiff? I hope you might do. It's a very, oh yes, I've got a few. Yes, it's a great place. And I gave them a piano recently, and I must tell you that I'm pleased that they seem to be using it regularly. And if I do move down to Cardiff, which is a possibility, I shall go along to Chapter, because there is a picture which I shall show you of our school, and I'm the guy in the picture with the wine glass. I don't know if you can see that. Can you see it, Laura? Yes?
Yes, we can see
yes,
it.
That's good. And in fact, in that picture, you see, that was taken quite some years ago, and I'm just looking at it. I'm the guy in the white shirt, and the second row sitting are the teachers. Sadly, not one of them still alive now, and there's a few of us still about, and that was Canton High School, which was, for me, a great occasion, because whilst, for example, the school was the worst in Cardiff at rugby and cricket, it was by far the best when it came to music and drama, because we had two headmasters one was a very, very keen musician who played the viola, not very well, but he played it. And we had a pipe organ. And then the second headmaster in my time there was very, very keen on theatre, because after music, which was such an important part of my life, theatre and acting and directing plays was another major element in my life. How are we doing for time? Have we got any more time, Laura? What?
Yes, 15 more minutes.
15.
15.
I hope you're not bored, everybody, but I'll do my best.
No, definitely not. It's lovely.
Thank you. So Canton High School was important to me, and I remember it with great affection. Of course, the girls were upstairs, the boys were downstairs, or was it the other way around? I can't remember. But certainly, because our school was bombed, as was Miriam's school. My wife, Mim, there's a picture I'll show you, where is it, of us when we got married in 1956. That was rather nice. I don't know if you can all see that. That was at Pennyland Synagogue, the first wedding that took place there. And she was rather special, I promise you. And when she died in 2004, something died in me. let's move on. I've just done a stupid thing. I've gone back to something sad, haven't I? However, we're all close. All of you who are listening and watching me, and I'm relating to you. Again, I'm going to quote one of my favorite Englishmen, a fellow called Shakespeare, whom I really am crazy about. He and Beethoven are my two great heroes. And Beethoven, Shakespeare once said in one of his plays, quote, "You are a part of everyone you meet." So there's a bit of me in each of you now watching and listening. And sadly, I can't relate to you the other way at this moment, which is a damn shame. But I'm with you in spirit, all of you. Okay, let's move on. London years. When we got married, we both wanted to get away from family. Again, I won't go into it, but we moved to Chiswick in London. And I moved into the, you see, I should explain to you, I had a scholarship to the Royal Academy of Music, which sadly I was unable to fulfill because 8-9 weeks before I was due to go up there, and it was a marvelous opportunity. I had a bursary of 3 years free tuition with the best clarinet player in the world at that time, the great Jack Brymer. And I had 148 quid to live on each year, which you could live like a lord. But 8-9 weeks earlier than that, I broke my jaw in Snowdonia, not through talking too much, which I do, but through falling down and being stupid. I mean, I asked for trouble and I bloody well got it. So I was unable to fulfill that. So after the crying stopped, I went into business machines. I sold initially calculating machines, and then I moved into the computer business. And instead of making music, I made money. I was successful. And the joy of my life was working for a strange organization called Honeywell Computers. And Honeywell Computers, I've got something coming up from Shearer Slate. My mother was Elga Kitchener. Yes, yes, yes. Well, yes, that's amazing. I'm glad to, it's all coming good, isn't it? I forgot where I was now. Where was I? What was I? Let me think.
You were talking about how you had your scholarship and then
yes.
on to.
Thanks. You see, I'm losing it. I'm growl. The other day, I couldn't remember some people's names. I was thinking, what's the name of that wonderful singer from Tiger Bay? And I still can't, for the moment, bring it back. But before long, I hope I will. But I can see her. She was a wonderful singer. I went into computers. I was with Honeywell, and they were very, very much the underdogs, but it was such good fun. And this was important to me. And that's the second phase of my life. Remember I told you at the very beginning, it was all threes. Well, the first phase from 1 to 16, which was wretched. And then from 16, when I met Miriam, it was all about going forward. There were loads of ups and downs. I've been at the very top. I've been right in the trough of despair. I was the first person ever in this country to be made redundant from a big job I had. I was getting £6,000 a year, which was a lot of money in those days, and a company car. And the Callaghan time when he was the Chancellor of the Exchequer was a disaster, and I was at the bottom of the trough. So I've been up and I've been down, up and down. And that second phase, when the children were born, and they're all marvelous children, I'll tell you about them briefly, was from the age of 16, really speaking, yes, when I met Miriam, until when she died in 2004. That was a long period of time. I've got 3 children. Mark lives in Cardiff. He's an amazing musician, Mark Elton. He lives in Riverside. As he often says, I'm the last Jew living in Riverside. And he is as fine. I mean, I'm a good musician. I still am. I teach. I've got 2 lessons I'm giving this afternoon, face to face, I'm glad to say. But Mark is so much better. The next one down near me was for 26 years, a consultant psychiatrist, and she's now retired. She's a youngster of 59. Mark is 61, and the baby included is now 58. She's living in near Oxford, and they're all happy, and they're lovely people, and I do see them not enough these days. What's this? Bell Ansel, Duboff, yes. Ah, the Duboffs, that's right. I remember them well. That is interesting. I remember Duboff very, because it was all in Habonim. I'm going back now. Gosh, are we all right for time, Laura?
Yeah, that's fine. It's nice because you're able to answer everybody as the comments are coming in. So I think that's perfect.
Well, that's good. Habonim was a Zionist youth movement, which was a bit up its own backside in a sense. We thought we were the greatest. We were socialist. We were very, very posh. We could read and write. It was interesting, and a lot of them went off to Israel. And there have been some amazing people who were ex-Habonim. Maureen Lipman was a Habonim person from Leeds. Jack, what's his name, her husband, the playwright, was there. Mike Lee, the filmmaker, was. Jonathan Friedland was. David Baddiel, who's my godson, was in Habonim. It was another formative thing for me. And we used to meet at the back of the shul, the synagogue in Cathedral Road. And that's Mim was in charge of the little ones. I was in charge of the 12 to 16 age, and they were difficult as they knew everything. And then of course we, the elders, looked after ourselves. What else can I tell you? We lived in London and in Thornbury. Thornbury is about 12 miles north of Bristol, where we were very, very active. Strange to tell you, in that period of living in Bristol, I was approached, oddly enough, by each of the 3 main political parties to become members of them. That is the Conservative Party, the Liberals, as they were then known as, and of course Labour. And I said, in each case, no, I wasn't interested because it wasn't for me. And I never regretted that. But in Thornbury, Mim and I were very active. We created a community association, which still exists. It's called the Chantry. And I was very proud of it. If we hadn't lived there, it wouldn't have happened. And it was really, really something. And Mim was on the council and she made things happen. She really was quite somebody. So that was that. Gosh, we've been going for a long time. I'm just thinking if I've anything else to tell you. London.
What brought you back to Wales then, Lionel?
Well, that's a good question, Laura. Yes, what brought me back to? Well, the roots are here. I've always loved the Welsh because of their friendliness, because they've suffered. And if you haven't suffered in this life, you're a lesser person. Not that I want people to suffer, but those who haven't, those who've been born with the proverbial silver spoon in every orifice, sometimes get above themselves. And, you know, it's those at the bottom of the pile who need help. So, why I came back, well, I have a cousin who sadly is not at all well at the moment. She's probably at the end of her time. And I've known her since she was 8, and I was an old gentleman of 11 and a half. And it was because she called me about 9 months after Mim's death. And in fact, I moved back to this area I moved, I stayed in the house in Amersham, because I should explain that Mim and I lived for she lived for 22 years in Amersham, which is a classy area. What have we got here? When and why did I become an atheist? Oh, all right, I'll tell you. It's a good story. I will come back to that. I promise. I'm not very much of an atheist, but anyway, I'll tell you about that. Where was I? I was somewhere else, wasn't I? No, where was I?
Talking about how long you'd lived.
Oh, yes.
That's
right. I came back because of my cousin. And I also always felt, and Mim and I felt, that we should lend our days in South Wales, because that's where we met. Although Mim was born in London, and she was a genuine Cockney, because she was born literally round the corner from Bow Church. But her father was a Cardiff lad who went to school in right near the station in Tudor Road. So there was always that connection. But to answer that question, which someone came up, why and how did I become an atheist? Well, I will tell you, and it's quite amusing. As I said recently to the rabbi in Bristol, whom I was speaking to only a few days ago, to get some names of people whom I knew from many years back, most of whom are no longer with us, but some are, and I'm in touch with them. I said to him, look, I was in fact bar mitzvahed, and I'm still circumcised, which made him laugh. But I was a very good bar mitzvah boy. I mean, bar mitzvah is quite an ordeal for many Jewish children of 13, because you are on your own on the bimah, the altar. You're taking the service and you're on your own and you're speaking in a foreign language. And many people can't sing. Whereas I was gifted, I can sing, not very well. I'm no great singer. By any means, but I can sing in tune, and I do teach people, and I have conducted choirs and everything else. But the point was that I was being taught by a wonderful old boy called Reverend Jerovich. Jerovich lived in Hamilton Street, was about in his 70s when I was 13, and I absolutely adored him. And because I was such a good singer, and I enjoyed being in the limelight, he said to me, he used to come to the shop, because my parents had a shop in Leckwith Road. They had a shop in Grangestown before that, and as well. And he said to me, Lionel, you're my finest ever bar mitzvah boy. I'm very proud of you. And in a few weeks' time, you'll become a man, and I expect you to come to shul every Saturday, because we sometimes lead people to make a minyan. A minyan, by the way, is 10 men who have been bar mitzvahed, and that they can start the service, and not until the 10th one enters the shul. Okay. So when I heard this, he said, I expect you to be a regular attender. And I said to him, innocently, I'm sorry, Rav. I called him Rav, although he wasn't a rabbi. I said, I'm sorry, Rav, I won't be able to do that. And he said to me in astonishment, why? And I said, well, I do football training then. Oi, he shouts. And my mother comes running in from the shop. What's going on? What's happening? Is he being naughty? And Rev said, no, Edie, he's all right. We're just having a little chat. So she goes back into the shop. And he said to me in astonishment, he said, tell me, Lionel, is football more important than God? And I said, yes, Rav. Oh, God. And he said, oi, 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 God. And he said to me, he suddenly dawned on, he said, look, it's the bar mitzvah is in 2 weeks. You're still going through with it, aren't you? And I said to him, of course I am, Rav. And he said, well, why are you doing this if you don't believe? And I said, I'm doing it for you. Tears, tears, tears. Now, to answer your question, my friend, why it wasn't long before that I saw in the Western Mail a picture. This was after the war, remember? I was born in 33, so it was 1946. There was a picture of a pyramid of Jewish children dead at Bergen-Belsen, which was liberated by the British. And when I saw that, I thought to myself, if we are the chosen people, how can God allow this? Maybe that answers. And one of the mysteries is this: how the Jewish idea that the religion, how he could survive such a terrible, terrible tragedy. No, any questions? I've said enough.
If I come in now and I say thank you so much, Lionel, because I think that's the biggest travesty on Zoom, is you don't get the round of applause you deserve. And that was a really interesting and wonderful talk. So thank you very much. Before we move on to have a bit of a question and answer session, I just wanted to say, I think this is an example of why taking oral histories is just so interesting and so important, because every one of us has such a unique story to tell. Yes. And we can all relate to each other through, like you said, I love it, the up and down of life. I think, you know, most people have these high successes and the crashing defeats, don't they? And you can really relate to somebody through that issue. Because in my mind, there are two types of history as a historian. There's the document-based, very sort of formal history that's written by the people in charge. And then there's the oral history, where it's the public feelings and the sentiments of day-to-day life. And those are the stories that let us reach out and touch the past and really hear the human voice. So the Jewish History Association of South Wales have already collected about 70 oral history interviews, and we're now undertaking a project from this October to record hopefully about 70 more from the Jewish community. So anyone that's had time in Wales or still lives in Wales or a story to tell us. So often when we're talking to people in the Jewish community, you have these stories of persecution, of fleeing homelands where their predecessors were living in fear. So they've come to foreign shores with nothing, having to rebuild their lives from scratch, just like Lionel's parents, well, grandparents did. So it's these stories of strength and survival. They're passed down to us through these oral traditions, and we want to capture them before they get lost. So it's shameless plug time, but we are running an oral history fundraiser at the moment. So if I can ask if Rob can pop the details of our crowdfunder into the chat, and any donations would be really gratefully received, because we're about £2,500 short of our target. And if we don't reach the amount by the end of the month, then we won't get any money from anybody. It will all get returned. So even if it's just you enjoyed the talk today and you want to donate what you think a ticket would have been worth paying for, so we would really, really love that. So thank you so much. And thank you for your continued support.